أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, praise and blessings of Almighty God be on the seal of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his companions, and all those that follow his footsteps from now until the day of recompense. It's been a while when we last covered the first unit of understanding economic policy making. This is as a result of lack of time and lots of official commitments that kept me away from my camera and the lesson. God's willing, today we're going to continue with Unit 2, which is fiscal policy. If you could recall, in the previous session, we have covered the definition of the GDP, the circular flow diagram, the business cycle, and how to interpret graphs of the business cycle, unemployment, and inflation. So if you could understand this, it's like you are making a diagnosis, and after making that diagnosis, then you will now go ahead and make a prescription as a doctor of economics. This prescription is what led to policy making, and that's what we will be discussing in this particular session, which is how to make the prescription of some of the fundamental economic problems affecting the GDP, business cycle, employment, and then inflation. So to start with, we are going to start with the first prescription of how to make some of these corrections, which is the fiscal policy. God's willing, we're going to cover all aspects of fiscal policy, policies in this particular unit. And I hope you're going to continue to join us in this special session of understanding government economic policy making. I'm your host, Dr. Abubakar Adam, and inshallah, I'll do my best to make sure that I give you the best that you all need as far as this session is concerned. Some of the topics we're going to cover in this session or Unit 2 include restrictive and expansive fiscal policies and the multiply effect, crowding out, the automatic stabilizers, and then fiscal policies in the real world. So these are some of the topics or subtopics we're going to cover in this particular unit of fiscal policy. And I hope, inshallah, you will all join us and make sense out of all that we're going to cover in this particular session, in this particular lesson, and be able to say something about how governments make their fiscal policies and how their fiscal policies affect our day-to-day activities. Without delay or wasting much of your time, let us just go straight to this restrictive and expansive fiscal policy. When do we use restrictive fiscal policy? Governments usually use restrictive fiscal policies whenever the economy is overheating. What I mean by the economy is overheating is that our GDP is above potential GDP. So when the GDP is above potential, then we will be faced with what is called an inflationary gap. Now, to fix this problem of inflationary gap, then the government will make use of restrictive fiscal policy. Now, there are two tools to prescribe as an economic doctor on how to deal with this restrictive fiscal policy. The tools are government spending and taxation. So the fiscal policy uses these two tools in order to correct the economic situation, to slightly correct the economic situation. It's not going to be 100%. So the government make use of the government spending and taxation in order to correct the inflationary gap of the economy. That's when prices are too high of all commodities. That means that the GDP has grown above potential GDP. We're going to look at that in a graph and see how it works, how the restrictive policy work or prescription work in the economy. We'll also look at the expansive fiscal policy when the GDP is growing very slowly, below the potential GDP. Then we make use of what is called the expansive fiscal policy, using these two Panadols or these two medications, which are the government spending and taxation. So we're going to look at it practically on a graph and see how they all work and how they affect the GDP and how they affect the economy and how they correct the situation in the economy. So if you're ready, let's go to our whiteboard and let's try to sort some of these problems out. Now, without delay or wasting much of our time, let us go straight to our normal economy. When you look at the normal economy here, you will see that the aggregate demand has sloped downward and then the aggregate supply slopes upward as usual. So if the economy is overheating, which is above potential, that is creating inflation, then the government make use of these two tools in order to correct the economy by reducing government spending and increasing taxation. So government will reduce government spending, which is minus, and then increase taxation, which is plus. When they do that, then the economy is the aggregate demand is going to shift to the left. When they make use of any of these two, the aggregate demand is going to shift to the left. And then when the aggregate demand shifts to the left, for example, like this, when it shifts to the left, what will happen? Then you will discover that price level will go down. Price level is going down. That means correcting the inflationary gap. But another issue is a trade-off with unemployment. But we will see that this GDP is going backward here. This is our new GDP coming here. This is our new GDP. All right. So when you have a new GDP, you corrected the economy, you restricted using restrictive fiscal policy. If in the other way, in the other scenario, the economy is growing very slowly and creating unemployment gap, not inflationary gap, then all that the government have to do is to make use of government spending and taxation, increasing government spending in social welfare and other poverty alleviation programs and whatsoever. Increasing government spending here will help in fixing this problem. So now aggregate demand is going to shift to the right. When aggregate demand shifts to the right, then you will find out that the new GDP is here, which is to say that the GDP has grown to a certain level and price level is going to go up. Then we're going to, that's a trade-off. That's the trade-off. When the GDP goes to the right, then you expect unemployment to drop, unemployment will go down, and then inflation will go up. That's the trade-off. That's the trade-off in the Phillips curve that we have discussed earlier on. So this is how the government use fiscal policy, making this use of these tools, two tools of fiscal policy in order to correct the economy: restrictive and expansive. We call it expansive when you increase government spending and reduce taxation. We call it restrictive when you reduce government spending and increase taxation. For example, in this case, this is a restrictive fiscal policy. Sorry, let me clean this. This is a restrictive fiscal policy here. These are restrictive. Now, in expansive fiscal policy, then government spending is going to go up. This is restrictive, and expansive will be add government spending and reduce taxation. So this is what will happen in expansive fiscal policy in order to correct the unemployment gap and help the GDP to grow to its potential. And this is what will happen in order to correct the inflationary gap to help the GDP to move to its full potential.